Hey everybody, welcome. My name is Simon Head. I'm the director of Subversives, the history of Lowest of the Low. Thank you for checking this episode out. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This helps the channel out tremendously. It gets it in the algorithm. The hamster runs on the wheel faster. I think that's how it works. This long form interview with Matthew and Victor Page was done on the 17th of October in 2021. Interesting thing about this is that it's the first time I ever interviewed two people at the same time. They had such a strong history in the very beginnings of the band. I'm so glad that I got to do it with them. And thank you, Victor, and thank you, Matthew, for doing this. I really appreciate it. Want to let you know that you can still stream the movie on Apple TV in Canada, United States, UK, Ireland, and Australia. Anywhere else, go get a VPN. You can also stream it on YouTube. YouTube is a worldwide thing, so you can watch it there. Let's get those numbers up. Let's make some people happy, okay? If you don't want to do any of that, you want to buy a Blu-ray, the best thing you can do is go to a Lowest of the Low show, pick one up there. Go to the merch table, buy one off of Sue.
I'm starting to cry.
Go buy one from the merch table. It's the best thing to do. It's the best way to support the cause. And if that doesn't work, you can actually just get one on Amazon. That's your last thing you can do. The best thing you can do is tell your friends about this band, Lowest of the Low, and how awesome they are, and then you can then make your own decisions and go buy the stuff you need to buy. This is my interview with Matthew and Victor Page, and we'll see you again on another one.
Do this one.
You high five with your feet. Cool. Let me just put these, make sure that's in focus because my eyes are not.
Yeah, that's good point. I might want to clean my glasses lenses so I can actually see you.
And then I have you, Matthew. Is it Matthew or Matt?
Either or, it's totally fine, yeah.
And Victor,
Yeah.
you talk to me loud, nice crowd.
Yes, so we started our business, blah, 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 blah.
Well, it's very important. No one would have known, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess thanks for doing this. By the way, I think
You're
we
welcome.
have to, officially say thank you. It's been it's going to be a fun road. You guys are very much a part of this whole thing, and the history probably be different if you didn't. So that's what I'm trying to tell.
Yeah,
Oh, that's very nice to hear.
So let's talk about the first time you saw Lowest of the Low and met Ron and the boys.
and I don't think either of us remember specifically.
Sort
I
of,
remember just from the point of view of, at that time, again, Barenaked Ladies were playing in all kinds of different clubs, but it was always 2 or 3 bands on the bill, and I'm sure that's when I met them at some point, is that they were on the same bill. Barenaked Ladies were opening for them, or vice versa, or whatever. So it was in that time frame, and it was kind of, each time you would go out on an evening like that, there was always a sense of, Lowest of the Low are playing over at the Rivoli tonight. We're going to be here. Maybe some of the guys are going to go over after, or it was that kind of camaraderie. So I don't have one specific memory in mind, but was certainly aware of being in their company on various occasions.
And for myself, I believe I was in first year university when my dad had his first interaction with them. I was at school in Ottawa. I remember my dad calling me saying, you've been introduced to this band. I got this record. I think there's some real promise here. They seem to be really, touring a lot, and I want you to hear the album. And I remember listening to the album, thinking, production could be better, but they got some good songs, and it wasn't until I went to see them, and I seemed to think it was a horseshoe show of some sort. They were either headlining or not. I'm not sure at that time, but I was 19 years old, 18, 19 years old, and in a bar, so I must have been 19 maybe. Legally, but I was also kind of starstruck by anybody who was on a stage at the time. So for myself, I was uncomfortable in my own body, but also uncomfortable around other people. And I think the first time seeing Ron Hawkins with his mohawk, for me was intimidating. you know, yet, you know, met Steve Stanley, and he was really welcoming, nice, sweet guy, and so I think it developed, you know, I recall that initial interaction, and you know, I think over time you know, Steve Stanley and I developed more of a relationship than myself and the other guys, but yeah, that's kind of, I just remember being intimidated by them.
But they're such nice boys.
They are, they are.
So I guess the first time you heard you just already were
Yep.
over the fact hearing Shakespeare.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need to. You cut that. So describe a little bit what the Canadian music scene was in the early '90s and where you guys sort of found your place in it.
Excellent. I started primarily with Barenaked Ladies, although I had been involved in various other aspects of the music business. I ran the Mariposa Folk Festival in 1970. I was in bands myself, so music was always a part of our family and always a part of everything we did. Barenaked Ladies started, so I decided I could help them by trying to get their product into stores. Long story short, we sold a whole bunch, and I wound up with a distributorship, really, because I had accounts with all the music stores across Canada. Well, as I was backing away from Barenaked Ladies, they had signed a major label deal. I realized that, well, there were probably other bands out there who could use the same service. And the difference was that I was just offering a straight fee-for-service kind of distribution deal, which the major record labels wouldn't do. And if you weren't signed to a major label, you couldn't get any product in stores. So because I had accounts, I could then go to bands and say, look, you know, for this fee, I promise to do this, 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 and this. You provide me with that. I'll do the accounting, get it back to you, and so on. So that's how it started. And Lowest of the Low was the best band in the land at the time, and I was thrilled to be able to start to expand my business with them. Followed by One, which was Chris Taylor, very well-known Canadian
Lawyer and music exec. Yeah.
music executive and lawyer.
Yeah.
He
started his practice out of our office at one point.
That's right, yeah. So he was the next band I signed, and then Melanie Doan, who is a wonderful musician, done all kinds of acting and singing, and it went on from there until we had, I don't know, 20 or 30 or so bands signed, and then EMI came along and wanted to go into partnership with us. Now that's another whole long political story, but
ultimately it was bands like Barenaked Ladies, Lowest of the Low, One, Melanie Doan that established the business as it was, and you know, the scene at the time, I think, was what I really remember about it now, looking back at it, it was how diverse it was. You know, coming out of you know, the hair band '80s and into the grunge era, you know, those were what became mainstream. But there were all kinds of different artists of all kinds of different genres of music out there. And
a band like Glue Leg stands out in my mind, which is this kind of metal come big band come rock come whatever, great sound.
Things,
but, you know, completely, now it's time for something completely different.
You know, what I loved was there was like, you know, there was a lot of kind of historic ska, reggae that was influencing more 90s, you know, punk rock. There was, you know, the explosion in the mid to late 90s of you know, Canadian hip hop and R&B to, you know, nerd rock like Barenaked Ladies and Moxie Fruvis and all these other kinds of groups. So there was really something for everyone out there, and I think we spoke earlier about, but you know, being able to open up the you know, Now magazine and seeing, you know, page or two pages of all these ads of different venues that existed. and who was playing each night. And three bands every night, and however many 15 different venues was incredible. And it was looking back now, I wish we had a scene like that to be entertained by. There simply isn't anything like it anymore.
Yeah, everything goes in a circle too, right? So live
Yep.
music right now doesn't seem to be the flavor.
Well, and there isn't necessarily a sense of, it's hard for me being removed from it to really know, but I don't see as much of a tight-knit community of bands and musicians in the city anymore. Now, again, I'm quite removed, but back then, there was this real sense of community amongst, and it didn't matter what kind of music you were playing; you were all just part of the scene. And everybody had kind of a mutual respect, and I think technology has changed. The way that we access music has changed. So the live scene doesn't exist much anymore, unfortunately. Plus it's been difficult to get out and see bands over the last few years, but even still. It seems much more fragmented. It's a global network of artists and musicians these days. You find your way to promote it through social media or through other digital means, and that community can be global as opposed to municipal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just so you know, Ron still holds that community of, he brings in his friends' bands and his friends to open up.
Yeah.
It's a very uncommon thing because of how such a grip booking agents have on bands now, that Ron and the band can say, we want to bring in Sky Wallace, who's relatively a nobody, to open for us and put him in front of our audience. That's a sense of community that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I at least, not that I'm aware of either.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So you did speak a little bit about how the cultural shift. Anything else to add to it, or is that pretty much?
I'm trying to think of from a cultural shift perspective.
Like a light switch, because everybody says it was a light switch between Svengali to Nirvana, almost like overnight.
Yeah, there really was. There was a lot of things kind of rumbling under the scene, but from a more mainstream perspective, absolutely, it really was a total shift. And I would like to think that, at least in Canada, it was groups like Lowest Low, Barenaked Ladies, and stuff like that started to kind of redefine what music could be, what popular music could be, in that it was new, it was unique. They were doing things differently. It wasn't part of the norm, right? And independent music wasn't necessarily, there were kind of really fringe type bands, but you could be more mainstream and independent, and that was kind of I think the start of all that. And as we look at now, where music has come and how music is promoted nowadays, it is much more fragmented. There's far less reliance on a major record company to sign you to a big deal. You can be extremely popular on your own on YouTube.
Yeah. Tragically Hip was the other big
of course.
icon,
absolutely,
of the era.
Yep.
And they were it was almost like a, do you like Beatles or Rolling Stones? Do you like Barenaked Ladies or do you like Tragically Hip? It was like that
Totally.
kind of thing.
Totally true.
And but they were more on in sync with the grunge movement.
Sort of, because they kind of came from the history of Canadian rock, like
Yeah.
pure 70s rock, 70s, 80s rock, and then I think they could adapt really nicely to that kind of sound, and also it was the songs were a little bit more protest-like,
Right.
more socially conscious than what the 80s hair band was about.
The other interesting thing I find is that underneath all of that camaraderie was this kind of fierce sense of independence. You had to be indie. You had to be, it was kind of, you can bleep this, it was fuck corporate rock and roll.
Yeah.
So all these bands were quite proud of the fact that they had that kind of brotherhood, if you will. Now, correct me if I'm wrong here, it's almost flipped exactly the other way around, where if you're not corporate sponsored, you're not looked on as being very in or with it or worthwhile. Like you've got to have a, endorsement by Puma for sneakers or something, and then if you get that, then okay, you're cool. So it's just completely the other end of the spectrum now.
It's about placing your song in the right movie, in the right TV
Yeah.
show. The record sales aren't a thing anymore. I think if you got out of it, you got out of it in the right time.
Yeah.
The record sales in the mid to early 2000s went.
Oh.
I think I see. I mean, music has always been. There's been these, cycles of, revolt to corporate to revolt to corporate. Right? It happens every 10, 15 years, I think. And I think the '90s was a classic example of that, coming out of the corporate rock of the '80s, and a revolt into independence, which ultimately broke the record industry. Right, in so many ways. First of all, that you could actually, produce your own music and sell it, via, CDs. But then, ultimately, that independence and that acceptance of, wanting music for themselves, broke the industry, in that music became free as soon as it became digitized. The industry always seemed to be trying to catch up with the trend. They would see a trend in independent. Well, now we have to associate with these independent bands and develop it and be a part of it and grow it and a certain sound and capitalize on it. And then it's like, okay, no, fuck you again. We're gonna start ripping off your music and do it our way. And then they're catching up. And I think only now in the last 10 years they've really kind of figured out what that means and how to capitalize on it.
I still can't get used to the fact that there is no more EMI. It's been this vacuum of sucking these companies down into two or something, and it's all online. And
but at the same time, now once they all figured out the new model, now they're all they contracted, and now they're starting to grow again and filter out again, and open up Canadian offices again and things like that. So it's a constantly evolving system, and I think we're probably 10 years away from another revolt. We'll see what that is.
Yeah.
Now this isn't in here, but it triggered my question. I had a question about this before, about what's your philosophy on art and commerce, between art and money making? There's this area between where artists sit, and they either teeter over to let's go make as much money as we possibly can. Then there's let's just do it like the load in, put up our middle fingers and tell everybody to go fuck themselves. Like in there somewhere, like where did you guys what was your philosophy on the whole?
I would like to think we were kind of right in the middle there, weren't we?
Well, my whole thing,
Or I was.
the whole reason I started was because it was obvious that the record companies were screwing the performers, that they weren't getting nearly as much for their efforts and hard work and so on. So I didn't want to own any rights to any songs or any records or masters or any of the rest of that stuff. Artists, go make your work, and I can provide a mechanical function of getting it sold and accounting for you and getting you some reasonable amount of money back. And that's it's a bit of a naive concept. All my contracts were completely open-ended. You stay with this as long as you want, and in the lowest of the lows case, they stayed to a certain point, decided they wanted support from a major record label, which is fine. Most people don't recognize, of course, the support that you get from major labels is your own money. The major label is really just a bank that says, sure, you need $100,000 to make a record. Here you are, $100,000. Now that comes back out of royalties, of course, and so on and so on. So, I'm on the side of artists need a lot more support. It's a very, very blurred, kind of murky picture, like how much money does the artistic community contribute to the gross national product? Well, I've never seen any kind of thorough breakdown of all of the ways in which these businesses, these small independent companies, generate money, as well as art and entertainment and what their express purpose is. So that's kind of fuzzy. Nobody ever, we can take a company like a gold mining company or a whatever company, and okay, they've got this much business, and isn't that great? That's terrific. Well, you can't, you don't, it's really hard to say that about the artistic community. And recent times have pointed out how little support there is for artists who can't perform for a variety of reasons. So, I think you'll find that there will have been quite a shrinking of those people who have had to say, look, I can't do this anymore. I got to get a job that makes me some reasonable income. So that kind of support isn't like it was kind of last on the list of, well, we got to get these. We got to support this corporation. We got to support that one. We got to, we need money for the airplane industry. We need money for the. Well, if you look at the gross national product, you look at the amount of money generated by those various enterprises. You may have been supporting the wrong people.
Yeah, I'm of a similar mindset. I think that, one of the things that we were always challenged with and questioned about was, are you okay with that band going on to a major label? Like, yeah, isn't that great? Like, that was our attitude was like, yeah, great, good for them. They've achieved success and they can now go mainstream because we're not ever going to be able to, invest the kinds of dollars needed to, bring them up to that sort of level.
Yeah, that was always an issue. When I'd sit down with a band to sign it, I would say, look, we're not a management company.
Yeah.
We're not a promotion company. You've got to provide those services.
Yeah.
You get the product to us, we'll do the mechanical thing of selling it and getting your money back.
Exactly, and I think as we evolved as a company, we started to integrate some of those types of services, for artists because they were needed. But that's just the simple growth of a business.
Yeah, that was later on when we were involved with EMI. We could provide some of those services.
Right, but it was but even still, it was still a distribution company, and we did not want to seek the rights of the artists, right? That's their ownership, and we hear so many stories of bands that were dropped or bands that companies went bankrupt or whatever, and can never get the rights to their music back. It's owned and controlled by these corporations, and that just doesn't seem right.
This theater is a sort of a metaphor of what you guys are talking about. City run.
Yeah.
And you don't give a crap about the art we put on the stage.
Right.
You care about the bottom line.
For sure.
So if we have a present series. Sorry, it's got nothing to do with anything.
No. Yeah, it's good. Totally good.
Present series, we put Howie Mandel on the stage. We'd lose money on it, even though we sell every seat out. But we do it to raise the brand of the art we can bring to Richmond Hill.
Right. Treat it as a lost leader, then you have other ones that actually will generate the income.
Yeah. Say, well, how much money did you make on it? Well,
right.
We probably broke even. Well, that's not good enough. The dance company will come in and dance for 2 weeks and give us $80,000.
Right.
That's what we like.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
So it's funny how you're talking about because it all triggered all this up to. That's what
sure.
That's the fine line we walk between our.
There's promotion and there's there's sales, right? And some of those things you have to treat as loss leaders to generate the other steady income that will keep coming in.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You went over the Indy flag, flying the Indy flag. I don't think. Do we really need to go over the initial distribution deal terms? I think you kind of hit on that, saying open-ended contract.
Yeah. And I think they were.
Was it $7 a record? Is that what we used to provide? Something like that.
You paid out $7 a record?
I think we paid them about $5.
Oh, $5?
Yeah.
Oh, because we paid for the.
Because we paid for
manufacturing as well,
and so on, and
we had cassettes and CDs.
Yeah. Which was about 5 times more than they would have made with a major label.
Yeah.
To this day.
Yeah.
No, even worse these days with the royalties you make off of.
And they call it the full circle deal.
Yeah.
which is like, we're going to take some of your merch now, which is like, I would
nice.
never want to be a 24-year-old talented person in the music industry.
I would just remember, selling merch, because I used to do that for Barenaked Ladies, and every venue taking a cut, right? And when you get to those big shows, you do the Ontario Place Forum, and they were taking 40%. And you're like, that's why shirts are so expensive at concerts.
Take the tax, take the HST or GST, whatever you want to take. That's it. It's our money. Because John tells a story where he'd go to the bar and say, well, we brought all those people into the bar. We're entitled to 30% of your bar. And then all of a sudden, here's all your merch money.
No, that's it. The bigger the venue, the higher the T-shirt cost. And that was just, you'd literally have to double your cost. Ultimately, bands would want to sell their shirts for $20, $10, $20. But, those venues, you're in the $40 to $50 range.
There's a story of when Low played Edgefest, and they said, we're not going to play unless we can keep 90% of our shirt sales.
Wow.
And poor Frank Wiper, I don't know if you know who he is, but
I remember the name,
he had to go to bat for the band.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
So the success of Shakespeare in My Butt, obviously noticeable. And obviously, because the Yellow Tape did so well, it seemed to be like maybe you guys are hitting some sort of good formula. Like, do you sort of see how that went, or how did you remember that type of thing?
Well, I remember that after I signed Lowest of the Low, and they started selling like crazy, people actually thought I knew something about music. Thought I had some kind of magic touch. I was distributing Barenaked Ladies, now Lowest of the Low, and this guy is terrific. And then it went downhill from there. No,
I mean, but what that demonstrates, it wasn't us, it was the bands doing the work.
Yeah.
Right? So, and if they weren't doing the work, there's no magic touch. We're just providing the distribution of a record. And that, but it came down to the work ethic. And I think the work ethic of the bands then were far superior. I mean, even through the 90s, as we started to experience, and distribute more and more artists, so few of them realized the kind of work that needed to go into it. Hardest working bands were always the most successful. You're looking at them, Tragically Hip, Barenaked Ladies, Lowest Low. I mean, these were successful bands because they were nonstop on the road, promoting themselves and being businesses.
Do you remember the influence of CFNY, Dave Bookman,
Of course.
Cross?
Oh yeah, they were terrific.
Did you guys have like a personal rapport with them, or did you just sort of appreciate them from afar?
Well, we appreciate. I was always, standing in the background kind of thing. I'd say, "Oh, hi." Dave Bookman, I met a number of times at various.
I mean, didn't really know him much, but like I would always just know we would know who each other were, and always great respect and brief kinds of conversations. But so unfortunately, no, I didn't really build a relationship with any of the people there. But the whole CFNY, thing was great. I mean, the fact that they were actively playing, independent music, and it wasn't so much about the ad dollars that the radio station needed to make, and obviously the things changed, but it was unique and a great environment for these bands to get noticed and get some exposure, and certainly the annual CD that they would put out, what was that called, Discovery? New music. It was their kind of contest that they would have each year, and that certainly helped bands like Barenaked Ladies and others as well. It was
Casby's too.
the Casby's, of course.
Casby's Award, right?
Casby Awards.
The lower up for Band of the Year with Casby's and Lost to Head.
Lost to Head. Isn't that interesting? Okay.
I was, just for my own sake, you have to recognize that I was teaching full time at the same time as I was doing all this.
That's true.
This was not a full time job for me. I was.
But isn't that the music business?
I know the
Yeah.
I was at the University of Toronto at the Faculty of Education, and so all of this stuff would be in the evenings, on the weekends, so you don't have the same ability to connect with people, provide the service you can provide, and be where you can be. But it was a terrific time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the magic of Low So Low, some people say it's the band members, the original four,
Yeah.
Some people say it's Ron's songwriting. Somewhere in the middle there is an answer. Describe sort of what because obviously the Low have gone through several changes in lineups, and if you followed them up until Hallucigenia, anything past there is like seemed to be sort of less important people, arguably. But the core of the band, sort of describe that magic that you think exists.
Yeah, what struck me immediately was they were real. You know, they really believed who they were. They were independent musicians, singing their guts out, working their ass off, doing what they really believed in. And in that way, they were kind of intimidating. Like I was, you know, I was this 50-year-old guy, teacher guy coming in, kind of, you know. So I never really spent a lot of time. I didn't have much in common with them that I could sit and chat about, talk about, and so on. So in that sense, I was eventually we got to know Steve Stanley better than Ron Hawkins, but I just really admired them for their tenacity. They were just really hard-working guys who did what they believed in.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like you said, isn't that the music business? You know, we all had, day jobs.
Right.
Right. As did the band members. Right. You know, so Steve Stanley was working at as a graphic artist, and designs. Did some work on some CDs that we put out as well. So he was a real artist, and in the truest sense, but had to have the day job and the night job, and I was at school in those early days, and then eventually worked at that. But music is always, I think, with most of these bands, are a passion and not necessarily a career. But if you can make a career out of it, then I think it's incredible, to be honest.
No, I agree. I mean, I thought of so many things at the same time. I just brain farted myself. But I agree with you.
Yeah. I remember working with John Arnott too, post Lowest of the Low, because he was doing sound in a lot of the bars and stuff, and I was playing in a band myself, and he was doing our sound at Ted's Wrecking Yard and stuff like that. Oh, did you?
Yeah, with John and Leslie.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I remember playing a couple shows at Ted's, and that was great. So got to know him a little better in that kind of environment. He was a really nice guy, a sweet guy.
Yeah. Did you ever get in contact with Yvonne Matzel?
Yeah, all the time.
She's in this.
She's she was my music mom ultimately. I mean, I worked the door at Ultrasound when I was 16 years old. And I remember for a Barenaked Ladies show, and I remember an undercover cop coming in, and looking at me and said, "Have you been checking IDs and stuff?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely. I've been checking IDs now." I remember he goes, "How old are you?" I remember you just standing on the stairs too, and I said, "Well, I'm 19." He looked at me and went, "Yeah, okay." And then he went upstairs, and I think gave Yvonne shit for having a kid work the door, to this day she still reminds me about that evening, and she was great, and she is great. Still in touch with her from time to time these days. Steve Stanley and Yvonne Matzel are two of the few people from my music days that we still follow each other on Facebook.
Yeah, she was wonderfully supportive to a lot of bands. Really good.
And people.
People, yeah.
People, big time.
There's a trend in that type of the scene with you guys and with Yvonne and with Ron and Steve and the band and other bands in that era. There's a trend of like having a respect and not trying to fill a void.
Yeah.
You guys just sort of got into that space where you were useful, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's I mean, they had a fear selling out, but I guess we've kind of already touched a little bit about that, that fear of work getting on a major label, or because the Hallucigenia did come out on a major record label. And did you notice anything different with the band after the major label? before the major label?
To be honest, I don't recall much kind of post that was different about the band. I mean, I remember the album being different, but being much slicker, and to me it was great. It was like, yeah, finally they're making a real rock album now, and it sounds great. And it was I think for us was a real proud moment for them, to see them gain that kind of critical success and make, I think, a record that they ultimately wanted to make at the time. I think it was from what I understand, a challenging record to make for them, and a lot of probably butting of heads in terms of what it was to sound like. But I think ultimately the product that did come out was great.
Yeah, a lot of producer issues and a lot of interband issues.
Yes.
Now this is really on here, but Ron did not take fame like who does take it in certain ways, right? You imagine all of a sudden you're a nobody, and all of a sudden you're somebody, and people dress like you. He didn't take to that very well, and he didn't appreciate the fans that would all of a sudden come and wanted to beat him at my school are now wearing flannel and. Can you discuss maybe a little bit about, maybe not just on his, but how a musician would say, I'm just a nobody, now I'm a somebody, how that can affect them personally?
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. You probably have some good opinions on that.
Well, you first of all have to have a core of values. Yeah. If you can hang on to your core values, then those things you can roll with the punches. Some people are better than others at turning on and off that switch. It's showtime or not showtime. I'm back to who I am. I mean, you can still be a wonderful, nice, warm, loving person in the showtime mode, but sometimes that gets mixed up. And you have to have enough space, enough time. That's what always does bands in, I think, is it's more claustrophobic than being married, because you're with your bandmates 24 hours a day for, could be 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks. And that's why so many bands break up.
Yeah, I think there's also, no band doesn't want to have success, right? Every band wants to be successful. But what is fame and what is success in their own minds, right? And I think that in a group, everybody's got a different vision of what that means. And unless you have that cohesive vision, it's hard to maintain a level of success, I think, because there's constantly differences of opinions. The most successful bands have had a similar vision of that. I remember being in Portland, Oregon, with Barenaked Ladies at one point, and getting up and playing in soundcheck. I played drums in a soundcheck with them once, and Stephen saying to me afterwards, what'd you think? I said, it's wonderful, but it's just too much for me. He goes, really? This is what I love. This is it. Some of these people, they have that. Isn't it great? So look how amazing this is to be in front of all of these people. And other people are like, kind of like success in a smaller way. And I think that that's ultimately what kind of happens in these bands. You look at U2, well, they continue because they all had a very similar vision of what success means. But a band like the Police all had very different opinions, and whether it be artistic differences, but also I think differences in terms of what success looks like and what a record should sound like and things like that. Yeah. They couldn't survive.
And you often run into, people want to do their own thing for a change, rather than a modulated version of it through the band. They want to do, so you get offshoots happening, and maybe that's good, maybe it's not good, maybe it's divisive, maybe it's
exactly. In a lot of those circumstances, you have bands doing other, side projects and stuff, and did they save their better song for that than this? And there's always those kinds of issues. Yeah.
Good segue into the breakup.
There you go.
Great segue. You guys did it for me.
There you go.
So the band breaks up kind of before they could really get a grip into the business. I mean, just maybe you don't know this, but people were trying to re-release Shakespeare. They wanted him to tour another tour on it. They were vehemently want to put this new record out and tour it. maybe it wasn't ready, maybe it was, but they just told the label what they wanted to do, and the label ultimately went, all right, well, off you go, and then they ended up breaking up. That's the wind, by the way.
That's the wind. Wow.
That's the wind. We've tried to get that fixed 1,000 times.
Wow.
So the band breaks up, kind of right before things might have clicked or not clicked, and a lot of it was Ron wanted to do his own thing, which is what you're talking about. So maybe just maybe it wasn't. I'm sure you guys were crying in your pillows when the Low broke up, But so you remember that time when you sort of found out your reflections on it, maybe.
Yeah, it was, I think disappointing to a certain extent, not disappointing in an angry kind of way, disappointing in a sadness way of, it was a great run, and I really saw that, I think there was great potential, and there could have been a whole lot more, and so it was upsetting in that sense. They were really thought they were on the cusp of something grand and amazing, and when you break up at that moment, it's it was sad, but you understand these things. You understand that there's band dynamics and artistic differences and different visions, and ultimately, there was a reason why it broke up, and it needed to be.
So a bunch of things happened. Ron does a couple of solo records. The reunion,
Yep.
the big reunion. Elliot Lefko keeps talking to Frank, their manager, well, de facto manager, saying, this much, yes, this much, no, this much, no, no. And then finally it was like, we can do this at the Molson Amphitheater with Billy Bragg and Weaker Than.
Awesome.
To me, that was like the pinnacle. I guitar tech that show, by the way.
Awesome.
And it was like the reunion.
Yeah.
So maybe, obviously, a lot of things went through the band, but when they got back together, did you think, oh, that's good? Because they actually broke up again, when kind of another time. So maybe talk a little bit about that. Early 2000s, band gets back together.
Yeah, well, early 2000s was a real, again, kind of, breaking point in music too, where, things started to really, Napster came along and all these sorts of things as well. But, I think proud of the fact that they were able to get back together, proud of the fact that they were able to play with one of their idols too, in Billy Bragg, and, at a venue of that size too. And, I guess at the time I remember feeling optimistic of, maybe this is gonna make another record, and this is the start of something good, really exciting again. But it didn't seem to sustain. I saw that they had some really good success across the border, Buffalo, a little bit as well, and in that sort of Buffalo-Toronto thing, and across the country. But so it was hopeful, I think, at the time.
Yeah. It was funny, Buffalo only was listening to CFNY. That's the only
Yeah.
reason why Buffalo was such, and maybe Rochester, but there was
Right.
these little pockets of Low fans. And it's all based on the Edge,
Yep, totally.
So, we're closing up here. Talk a little bit about the legacy of the band, things that will get left behind. Your input in the early days is something, the reason why we're talking.
Well, they have at this point kind of taken on somewhat of an iconic historical significance, because they, in many ways, were representative of that independent spirit of the time, and also in many ways representative of the difficulties involved in being a musician in the music industry throughout that period of time. They succumbed to all of the same pressures and that all the other bands had to face and focus on, and dealt with it in their own way. It's a tough business.
I think one of the things I can really look to them on is that never will music be made popular like it was, like they had done it, right? Ultimately through live performance. Nothing was digitized other than a compact disc. It was.
Yeah, you're right. You have to remember all of this stuff was before the internet.
Yeah, it existed, but it was like, not even barely. When we started the bigger business, that's when we finally, had a web page. I think we had one of the first music web pages in the country.
That's right. Should have hung on to it.
When,
Would have been worth something.
the one I still kick myself over it was I could have registered soup.com for $10, and I didn't. And frickin' Knorr has it now. I could have made hundreds.
Don't laugh. I met a guy in the late 90s who registered Pepsi.com. And he registered like all these crazy web pages, like domains, and hung on to them. And I swear to God, he was somewhere in Buffalo actually, and he must either somehow the lawyers got it back from him, but he registered Pepsi.
Amazing. Yeah. It was the wild, wild west, and really, if we look at it back then, it was the wild, wild west of music, in that you could do it your own way and go about it your own way, and and they were truly one of the pioneers of that. That spirit, and it's a totally different way of making music now, and a totally different way of promoting it. But what they did was really kind of establish what you can do independently in music, so I think that's a real legacy of theirs.
Amazing. In closing, you good?
Congrats on 30 fucking years. Holy shit.
That's right.
Yeah, God, like I'm his age now. When he started the business, I'm an old balding fat dude again now. And
It runs in the family.
he runs the family. It's great.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's good.